This is Dick Clark, rocking down to the year 2000, and that was Whitesnake.
We're not Whitesnake, dude. We're Poison.
I thought we were Quiet Riot.
It says here we're Rat.
Founded in 1973 by guitar prodigy Randy Rhoads and his friend bassist Garni, Quiet Riot was a band who struggled to get noticed. Record labels continually passed on the band, associating their sound with so-called dinosaur rock. But when the group was offered their first big break, it came with conditions they weren't entirely happy about. So much so, they tried to sabotage it. Instead, it resulted in the band making music history and paving the way for other similar sounding bands to achieve success. Today, let's explore the dramatic rise of Quiet Riot. The history of Quiet Riot begins with guitarist Randy Rhoads and bassist Garni. The duo enlisted vocalist Kevin DuBrow in 1973 and formed a band named Mach 1 before changing their name to Little Women. Garni admitted in an interview with The Metal Voice that himself and Rhoads were not really fans of DuBrow, but the frontman was very insistent and stubborn, and he was very driven, much like themselves, so they decided to give it a shot. DuBrow by this point didn't have a lot of experience just singing in garage bands for the most part. He had seen the Beatles in 1964 on The Ed Sullivan Show, and that's what kickstarted his interest in music. DuBrow, for his part, wasn't very impressed with Rhoads when he first met him, telling the Star Tribune, "I mean, this guy was weird. I swear he looked like a girl with that long hair down to his waist. He had this incredibly long thumbnail on his left hand, too. I didn't know what to make of the guy." But once Rhoads started playing, DuBrow was stunned. As for Garni and Rhoads not liking him, DuBrow admitted, "Rhoads only wanted me to take up time between guitar solos." DuBrow also added that the pair wanted someone who was good with chicks, someone who wasn't a pain in the ass, and someone who wasn't ugly. It really wasn't uncommon when you read a lot of the early interviews with Quiet Riot when they achieved success for DuBrow to talk himself up, and in one interview he even compared himself to a young Rod Stewart. The group rounded out their lineup with drummer Drew Forsyth, and they soon rebranded themselves Quiet Riot by 1975. This lineup of the group is sometimes referred to as Quiet Riot 1. As for where the name comes from, DuBrow claimed to the Chicago Tribune that musician Rick Parfitt from the British group Status Quo suggested the name to the musicians, and Quiet Riot took their musical inspiration from the 60s era British groups like Humble Pie, The Who, The Faces, as well as, of course, the Beatles. It wasn't long before Quiet Riot became one of the hottest bands in the LA scene alongside Van Halen by the late 70s. But record labels, strangely enough, weren't interested. Van Halen nabbed a major recording contract, but Quiet Riot didn't. DuBrow admitted that Van Halen deserved it more, telling the record newspaper, "They had a better rhythm section. Our original drummer was lousy." He added, "We were so desperate to get a deal, we were trying to adapt our sound towards what we thought record companies were looking for. Consequently, it got to the point that we didn't know what we were doing." And record labels didn't just reject Quiet Riot once, but several times. However, Quiet Riot's manager got the band a deal with Sony, who released the group's first two records in Japan, their self-titled record and their follow-up Quiet Riot 2. DuBrow shed some light on why they exclusively released their records in Japan, telling the interviewer, "A lot of it has to do with image. The Japanese people are really into the theatrical type of thing. We had a really pretty boy look in those days. The band was a lot younger, and the Japanese were very into that sort of thing." You're maybe wondering why not just release the records in the States? Well, their label Sony felt that Van Halen was the quintessential official LA band, and they didn't see any point in releasing Quiet Riot stateside. Despite this, the band did, however, get some exposure in LA. They were sometimes heard on the radio program Rodney on the Rock, Rodney Bingenheimer's show on LA radio station K-Rock. He would play them alongside punk bands like the Adolescents or the Circle Jerks or whatever else was on his playlist. Rodney played the song Slick Black Cadillac from their second record on a show. To support their first two records, Quiet Riot toured with both Journey and Black Oak, Arkansas. DuBrow in 1983 looked back pretty negatively on both of their first releases, telling the interviewer, "Those albums were crap. Back then we were playing this hard crunching music in person, and then making these wimpy albums. I don't really count those albums as anything significant. The band itself was quite dysfunctional by 1978. Garni and Dubrow soon came to blows, with the bassist departing the band after he allegedly attempted to kill Dubrow after a drunken episode. Apparently, Garni shot a gun at the ceiling, narrowly missing Dubrow during a brawl. Rudy Sarzo soon took his place, and Sarzo became familiar with the band by accident. One night, Sarzo initially went to see Van Halen at the Whiskey, but the place was so packed he couldn't get in, so he went to the Starwood, where Quiet Riot was playing, recalling they came off playing at the Starwood like an arena band, and I thought that was a very unusual and very unique approach. In the book Nothing But a Good Time, it's claimed that bassist Nikki Sixx was initially going to replace Garni, but Randy Rhoads said no, wanting Sarzo to join the group instead. Rhoads, meanwhile, was growing disillusioned and frustrated with Quiet Riot's lack of success as well as infighting, and was about to leave the band. This was around the time the band was going to put out their second record in Japan. While Garni played on the album, he was replaced on the cover by Sarzo. Others, meanwhile, in LA were starting to see what few others could. Dana Strum of the band Slaughter recalled seeing the band, stating, "I saw Randy play at the Starwood and my mouth was just on the floor. I thought, how is it possible nobody's really getting this? Nobody is seeing what I'm seeing. I looked around and I just felt personally moved and motivated by my love of music and that style. I was like, Jesus, he's so good. He shouldn't be here." Within a few weeks of seeing Quiet Riot, Strum ended up meeting Ozzy Osbourne at the Starwood, who was looking to put together a band after leaving Black Sabbath. Initially, Strum was offered to join Ozzy's band, but things didn't work out. Instead, he told the Prince of Darkness about Rhoads, who he'd seen a few weeks earlier, and Ozzy, for his part, had never heard of Quiet Riot, and upon calling Rhoads and speaking with him, the guitarist initially turned down the offer from Ozzy, claiming he wasn't a fan of Black Sabbath. But it was Randy's mom who pushed him to at least audition for Ozzy and at least meet him, and Randy's brother Kelly recalled, so he went and played for Ozzy in a hotel room. Ozzy was all f***ed and drunk, but he recognized the talent immediately. He said, "You're the greatest guitar player I've ever seen in my life." The timing seemed to work out perfect because the guitarist was growing frustrated with Quiet Riot, and so by 1979 Rhoads left the band, and bassist Rudy Sarzo soon followed, joining Ozzy as well. Dubrow remarked in one interview that he was of course initially upset when Rhoads left the band, but at the same time he could mold his new band into his own vision. Dubrow felt that Quiet Riot couldn't exist without Rhoads, so he started a new band using his surname, and over the next several years his band went through a number of lineup changes while their musical output was mostly limited. As you can imagine, Dubrow got about as much label attention as Quiet Riot did. You also have to remember that the scene in LA was changing. Sarzo recalled that by the late 70s and going into the early 80s, new wave and punk was taking over. Stephen Quadros, who played in the group Snow, admitted how so-called hard rock, or dinosaur music as it's referred to in the press, we're starting to see bands from those genres make concessions just to fit in with what was popular, recalling they were starting to wear, white shirts and skinny ties, putting a "the" in front of their names so they would be accepted by the new wave crowd. Of course, all this was about to change. Then in 1982, Randy Rhoads died in a freak accident while on tour with Ozzy. It was the same year Dubrow hooked up with drummer Frankie Banali, and the following year they soon found a savior in producer Spencer Proffer, who just happened to have a deal with CBS Records. Proffer recalled, "I was driving around LA and I heard the 1973 Slade version of Come On Feel the Noise on the radio on a pop station. It jumped out of the radio. This was anthem participatory rock. It invited people to participate. I said, holy shit, if I could find a band to sing the song, then I might be able to get CBS, who I had a deal with, to pay attention to me." Thanks to a friend of Proffer, he suggested to the producer that they check out the band Dubrow, who was known for playing anthemic rock. Proffer ended up attending a gig at an LA venue, the Country Club. In attendance that night were about 20 people, but what Proffer saw was that Dubrow was able to play songs like Bang Your Head and Party All Night with a lot of audience participation. Following the show, he chatted with the band backstage, and Dubrow knew who Proffer was and that he had his own studio called Pasha. Impressed, Proffer wanted to work with the band, but at his insistence, He suggested they fire the guitar player, and they did. They soon hired Carlos Cavazo, who was playing in the band Snow. Bassist Rudy Sarzo, meanwhile, soon rejoined the group following Randy Rhoads' tragic death, recalling, "After Randy died, I lost my joy of playing on stage, but being in the same room with my old bandmates, Kevin and Frankie, and also Carlos, who I knew from the local scene, that gave me a lot of joy." Proffer ended up cutting a deal with the band. He would give them studio time if they agreed to cover Come On Feel the Noise, and in return, he would let them record 3 of their own songs. By this point, the band was done with Sony, and all the other labels had already passed on them, so they agreed to the deal. According to Dubrow, Come On Feel the Noise was an insurance policy in case the band's other songs didn't find an audience. In fact, when Quiet Riot hit it big with their 1983 record, Mental Health, the label asked the band if they could release their first 2 albums in America, but they declined, partially out of respect of Randy Rhoads, since he wasn't a fan of those records. During a weekend in the studio with Proffer, the band cut the first 4 songs that eventually made their way on their landmark record, Mental Health. Even though the band agreed to Proffer's deal, Dubrow didn't want to cover Come On Feel the Noise. He even later admitted that he never heard the original by Slade, despite seeing the group open for several bands back in the 70s. Slade, funny enough, never really broke in America, but they had success elsewhere, and for a while, they were an opening act for a lot of big bands in America. According to drummer Frankie Benali, he had no issue with doing the cover song, but he recalled Kevin was livid at the idea. He saw himself as the consummate songwriter. He didn't need to do outside material. With bassist Rudy Sarzo adding that he witnessed a conversation in the studio between Dubrow and Benali about how to sabotage the song. Dubrow felt that if they sabotaged the song, it would be unusable, and Proffer would instead release the original songs the band had written and recorded, one of which was the track Slick Black Cadillac from their previous record. The band agreed not to rehearse the Slade cover ahead of time and just wing it in the studio. But Quiet Riot's recording turned out really good, and Proffer loved the performance. Benali recalled Dubrow flipping out on him for not screwing up the performance, and Dubrow, for his part, wouldn't allow himself to be the one that screwed it up. With the 4 songs now recorded, Proffer set up a meeting in New York City with label executives at CBS. He played them the songs, but the label showed no interest in signing the band, with one executive remarking how he hated the Slade cover. But after much convincing, Proffer got the money he needed to finish off the record. While the label agreed to sign the group and put out their album, they hated the name Dubrow, and they initially suggested some other monikers, including Periscope, Wild Oscar, but they instead went back to their old name, Quiet Riot, and this lineup is sometimes referred to as the Quiet Riot 2 lineup. The group released their 3rd album, Mental Health, in March of '83. Dubrow admitted he didn't think the album was going to make much of a mark because it was too heavy and no one would play it. So-called hard rock, or metal as the press labeled it, was out of fashion. Dubrow initially thought the album would only really sell once the group started playing live shows, but almost immediately it won critical acclaim, with BAM magazine claiming the album was, and I quote, "a prescription for anybody in need of a dose of healthy metal madness." But over the course of 1983, things slowly fell into place. 2 months after the album's release, Quiet Riot appeared at the US Festival, which drastically boosted their profile. Initially, they weren't even in the lineup, but after John Cougar Mellencamp dropped out, he was either going to be replaced by Scandal or Quiet Riot, and Quiet Riot got the gig. The money they earned from that performance allowed the group to continue to tour behind the record. However, getting their music played on the radio proved to be an uphill battle. The single Bang Your Head wasn't an easy sell to radio stations, and Proffer admitted he had to, and I quote, "mortgage relationships in a couple of markets," adding, "I called program directors personally, and there were only 4 or 5 markets in the country that played Bang Your Head. After those markets played the song, it soon became the most requested songs on those stations. Soon enough, MTV, which was still a fledgling TV channel having premiered 2 years earlier, came calling. They requested Proffer to get the band to make a video for the song. MTV initially aired the video at 3 in the morning, and soon after airing it, their phone lines blew up. The song ended up peaking at number 37 on the mainstream rock tracks chart and number 31 on the Hot 100 chart. The second single, that Slade cover, Come On Feel the Noise, busted the gates wide open for the group, with the song peaking at number 7 on the mainstream rock tracks chart and number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. Come On Feel the Noise became the most requested track on rock radio and MTV at the time, winning MTV's Friday Night Video Fights, knocking off competitors like ZZ Top's Sharp Dressed Man, the Rolling Stones' Start Me Up, and Journey's Separate Ways. It resulted in Quiet Riot having the first heavy metal album in history to go to the number 1 spot in the States, displacing the Police's Synchronicity. Metal Health went on to be certified 6 times platinum in America. The headlines about the band's success focused on heavy metal making a comeback. Dubrow also detested new wave bands, telling the Chicago Tribune that young kids needed musicians to idolize and worship and look up to, and that new wave groups were mostly generic. Slade's version of Come On Feel the Noise ended up being a number 1 hit for 4 weeks in the UK in 1973 when it was released. It was also later covered by Oasis of all bands. Slade's Jim Lee remarked about Quiet Riot's version of the song, saying, "Quiet Riot phoned us up and asked if they could use the song. They were a bit cheeky really because they'd already recorded it. Because of the success of the song in the States, we've got 5 major record companies trying to outbid each other and sign us to a major deal." But drummer Frankie Banali told a different story, later remarking that he thought Slade were a little jealous of Quiet Riot's success with the song. Quiet Riot ended up playing a show in the UK and offered the members of Slade a chance to come to the show with full limo service, but nobody in the band took them up on the offer. Banali later recalled to Ludwig Drums, "Later, I was shopping in Kensington Market and ran into Jimmy Lee. I wanted to shake his hand and thank him for writing a great song. He looked into my face and walked away, leaving me with nothing in my hand but air." As for why Metal Health was so successful, Dubrow told an interviewer, "I think it's because we wrote anthems. We did it unintentionally. These are songs kids relate to." He went on to add that the lyrics on Metal Health were quite trite and not very deep, adding that if lyrics are too deep, then the kids won't be into it. He also credited Def Leppard as paving the way for Quiet Riot's success, thanks to their album Pyromania, which came out in January of '83. So let me know your thoughts on the album in the comment section below, guys. That does it for today's video, and we'll see you again on Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.